start a small business. We enacted measures to stem the crisis in our housing markets, helping responsible homeowners stay in their homes, curbing the decline in home values overall. And we've seen some stabilization in the housing market. We cut taxes. Think about this, because you wouldn't know it from watching the news. The only tax policy we instituted during the course of this year was to cut taxes for 95% of hardworking families, just as I promised I would when I ran for president. And we passed the Recovery Act, which created or saved up to 1.6 million jobs, stopped our free fall, lifted our economy to the point where it's growing for the first time in more than a year. And I was just talking to the governor before we walked in, and he's got a whole series of charts about how much more steel was produced in Pennsylvania because of the Recovery Act, how much more infrastructure spending is taking place out here, putting people to work, doing the work that America needs done. So today's report is another hopeful sign that these steps that we took, difficult steps, have helped turn the tide. But we've got a lot more work to do before we can celebrate. Because even though our economy is now growing again, a lot of companies are still hesitant to hire. They're still worried about hiring. Now, some of this is because they're still trying to get out of the red, brought on by tough times this year, and they're still seeing consumers pull back because people got overextended on their credit cards, and those home equity loans suddenly didn't look so attractive, and so people are spending a little bit less. But part of what's happened also among a lot of companies is they figured out how to squeeze more productivity out of the workers that they've got. They're working people longer hours, they're doing more overtime, or not, but either way, they're producing the same amount of product or providing the same services without hiring more people. And that's something that we're going to have to really work on. Now, it's typical that it takes time for job growth to catch up with economic growth. And it's typical that it takes a little more time to come out of a recession when it comes to hiring. But Americans who've been desperately looking for work for months, some of them maybe for a year or longer, they can't wait. And we won't wait. We need to do everything we can right now to get our businesses hiring again so that our friends and our neighbors can go back to work. So yesterday at the White House, we had a forum on jobs and growth with leaders from every sector of our economy and every political and economic viewpoint, from the CEO of Google to small business owners who know our economy as well as anybody. And I want to ask them what they needed to start hiring again. And we had a frank discussion about a variety of ideas that helped refine our thinking. We talked about investments in clean energy to not only create jobs, but to make America a global leader in renewable energy technology. We talked about incentives for homeowners for the materials and labor they need to make their homes more energy efficient, and a smart electricity grid that saves you money and moves our economy forward. We talked about additional ways to lift small businesses, which are both the great generator of jobs and the truest reflection of our values. We talked about additional investments in America's roads and bridges and railways and ports. Nobody's been a bigger champion of this than Governor Rendell, rebuilding the critical infrastructure of our economy. So on Tuesday, I'm going to speak in greater detail about the ideas I'll be sending to Congress to help jumpstart private sector hiring and get Americans back to work. But here's the thing, Allentown. We've got to do more than manage our way through this crisis. Because long before the recession hit, many of our communities, including communities right here in Pennsylvania, were struggling even when the economy was doing relatively well. Plants were closing, jobs were leaving, especially in manufacturing. For too many families and communities, the recession wasn't a new challenge, it's a permanent one. It's been going on for a decade or more. So in addition to dealing with the immediate crisis that we face today, we've got to face up to the challenges necessary to strengthen our economy for the long term. That's why I've taken on our broken health insurance system, so that families and businesses won't have to cope with double-digit premium increases year after year. That's why my Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, is taking on our education system so that our kids can compete in the 21st century economy. And that's why we are working to upgrade America's most underappreciated asset, community colleges, just like this one. That's why we're doing everything we can to spur new industries like clean energy, to create good new jobs that won't be sent offshore. And that's why when the current emergency passes, I'm committed to bringing down the deficits that loom as a threat to our future economic growth. Now, here's why we have to do all this. Because for decades, Washington avoided doing what was right in favor of doing what was easy. And the middle class took a beating for it. It got papered over because there was a lot of cheap credit out there, so people were just able to keep up by getting more credit cards and taking out more home equity loans, but the long-term trends were not good. That's what was happening decade after decade. Well, I did not run for president to sweep our messes under the rug with the next election in mind. I ran for president to solve our problems once and for all with the next generation in mind. That's what we're doing right now. So here's the bottom line. I know times are tough. Michelle and I were talking the other day. There are members of our families that are out of work. You know, we're not that far removed from struggling to pay the bills. 5, 6 years ago, we were still paying off student loans. Still trying to figure out, all right, if we pay this bill this month, what do we have to give up next month? We're not that far away from that. But I promise you this, I won't rest until things get better. I know you may not agree with every decision I make, but I promise I will always tell you the truth about why I'm making these decisions. And I know